Major support for Out to Lunch is provided by the law firm of Jones Walker, established in 1937 with over 375 attorneys in offices throughout the U.S., providing a comprehensive range of services to a local, national, and international client base. JonesWalker.com. And by Shorten Associates, legal recruiters in Louisiana and Texas. And Orange Theory Fitness, delivering fitness results for a healthier world.
From Mansur's on the Boulevard in Baton Rouge, we're out to lunch with editor of the Baton Rouge Business Report, Stephanie Regal. It's business, Baton Rouge style.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Regal. Welcome to Out to Lunch. The music industry in Louisiana is one of the state's most powerful economic and cultural engines, though most of the credit and attention typically goes to New Orleans. Why is Baton Rouge overlooked, and what does the capital region have to offer in the music space? Joining me today to discuss this is Chris Maxwell, owner of the Red Dragon Listening Room, a local venue for live music that, as its name implies, really focuses on the music and the quality of the sound instead of the glitz and glam you might find in a larger concert arena. Founded in the early 2000s, the Red Dragon Listening Room really focuses on showcasing Louisiana talent and giving back to the community. It's a nonprofit, not a business, that puts money back into the arts and other nonprofit organizations. Though it's tucked away on Florida Boulevard in a neighborhood you might not be familiar with, it has been recognized by Newsweek magazine, no less, as one of the best places to hear acoustic music in a city that Newsweek described as one of the top 10 music meccas of the world. That was pretty incredible to hear that said about Baton Rouge. Chris has been active in the music scene for years and had a small independent record label until 2010 for obscure songwriters. He is a native of Canada who came down south as a young man, went to college at LSU, where he earned his bachelor's degree in marketing. Chris, it's a pleasure to have you here today on Out to Lunch. Thanks for joining me.
It's a pleasure to be here.
At the table with me and Chris is Dustin Luke, a local artist, musician, and songwriter who was born in St. James Parish and came back to South Louisiana after spending time in Brooklyn. Though Dustin signed with a major record label early in his career, which led to a 2-year stint touring and selling his music to films, he walked away from the corporate side of the business, and these days he travels the country in his 1987 Westphalia, performing year-round and connecting on a more personal level with fans of his music. Dustin, he's a guitarist. It's great to have you here with us today. Thanks for joining us on Out to Lunch. Chris, tell us a little bit about Red Dragon. It's a great concept and has such a loyal following, but how does a nonprofit venue work? How do you keep the doors open?
Well, we do one big fundraiser a year. We've done this for, I guess, about 12 years. For the first 6 years of doing it, we self-funded it. My wife and I would just cover the costs on our own. And as time went by, we were spending a lot of our retirement on this, so we got everybody else to help out. We do one big fundraiser a year, and that carries us through the year.
And as I mentioned, a listening room really is a place where you can listen and focus on the sound quality. It's an acoustic, right?
It is indeed. And my wife and daughter have a habit of reminding me each night before we start our show. We call it the "Shut the Hell Up" speech. It basically tells everybody that if they'd like to have a conversation, we'd like them to take it out to the patio, and it really leads to a lot better listening environment. So our patrons know it so well that if somebody begins talking in the middle of the performance, they'll quiet them down a little bit or tell them, shush or whatever.
Right, so it's not like going to a bar where you might have a band up on stage and everybody's drinking and visiting, right?
Exactly. We're the opposite of that.
So interesting. So it sounds like the kind of place, Dustin, that you would play. I mean, it sounds tailor-made for Dustin Luke. You haven't been there.
Yeah, it does. I mean, we play in barns, and like we start our events, long story short, after I was on a label, my record is not available anywhere. It's not even on Spotify. Like the record I'm known for is called So Long, and it was a story. It was a modern Cajun record. It's not Cajun music at all. It's just a story.
Yeah.
And of resilience, and it just kind of resonated with people over the years. And I was working a regular job for like 5 years, and people kept emailing me, like professing their love for this record, and
wow.
I met my husband, or this happened and that happened, and it was like one after another, and I realized, and then social media started to happen, and I realized that I could connect, directly with these people. I needed that sense of authentic connection. I didn't want to be up on a stage like with a barricade and on a poster. Like I already had that experience and it didn't resonate with me, and I couldn't sell out. So
Yeah.
I needed the intimate like connection with people. So yeah, I could relate to a quiet
I love
listening
your
room.
description. It's so cool. It's the
What's that?
The way you connect with your fans and the audience.
Yeah, I don't need to be like a hero. Like I want to be a regular person. I want to be able to like go in a cafe and not be recognized and be able to live life and.
So is it? Are you able to support yourself?
Yeah,
doing it?
it's
I mean,
sustainable.
it's
Do I need to
sustain-
make more money? Yes, but it's sustainable and I feel authentic in my work, and that's what I was after.
So what genre? Tell us about your style of
Ooh,
music.
Lord. So like I said, I was doing a lot of research in the early days, researching different Louisiana music, and we were in New York with samplers and drum machines and all that stuff. So I started with I connected Jamaican music, like reggae and dub music, that was connected to New Orleans. So folk music, folk songs were at the base of everything, whether I was using a drum machine or not. So it's a mixture of, hip hop was big at the time too. I was living in Brooklyn. I'm not a rapper, but there was a thing called trip hop too, which was coming out of England at the time. So, and as well as like bands like Radiohead and like more ambient music, more serious kind of tone of music. So, in my neighborhood, and I was in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. It was really creative at the time. We had bands like TV on the Radio, who was pretty big in our neighborhood, and a lot of folk bands, like folk-based, like Cat Power. I don't know if you know Cat Power, but so I'm a mutt. I like a lot of music,
Little bit of
but
everything.
folk is at the base of everything, no matter what kind of music.
Chris, what kind of music does Red Dragon typically showcase, or is it a variety of
I
genres?
tell everybody it's folk music, but it's really, we're kind of trying to be a little wider than that. A lot of the punk artists of the 70s are now the folk artists of the new millennium. I mean, we've had John Doe come and play with us from the band
Really?
X, and we've had Alejandro Escovedo, who was an early punk, and these guys have all just as time goes by, you strip it down a little more.
You whittle.
And it's
You strip away all the excess, and you're like, yeah.
And then we really go back to traditional folk as well. We had Joan Baez come when you were telling your story of connecting with your audience. I just love telling people that
That's amazing.
when
She
she
came?
played with us, the show ended. It was the smallest place she'd played since 1958.
Wow.
And she hugged every single person from the audience. Anybody who wanted a hug from Joan Baez got it. And then when she left, she's driving away, and the car pulls right back into the parking lot. And she jumps out. I thought maybe she had forgot to go to the restroom or something. No, she forgot to give my daughter a hug.
Oh,
she goes
my-
running
that's a
back in because she
wonderful-
didn't want to leave without hugging my daughter.
That is the coolest story.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, she's the sweetest lady you would ever.
So
ever
how
meet.
did you, for instance, attract Joan Baez to the Red Dragon listening room in Baton Rouge, or did she seek you out? How does it work?
It was really lucky. We had been sought out by Roseanne Cash to do a show, which was great for us. We had a wonderful time with her, and a fellow had just moved to town, was in the music business in Los Angeles, came to the show, and he came up to me after the show and said, "Well," he said, "I produce records by Joan Baez. Would you like to have Joan come and play with you?" I thought he was nuts. I didn't have any idea that he was really serious. But as time went by, he put together a little 3-stop tour called Baez on the Bayou.
Love it.
And she played 3 very small venues, one in Lafayette, one in New Orleans, and one in Baton Rouge. And it was spectacular. Her management didn't like the idea. In fact, they wouldn't even send her microphones. They said it wasn't
You're
a sanctioned
kidding.
event.
Oh, wow.
And she had to remind them who they worked for.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, thank you. Hello.
yeah. And
So how
that's-
did you have to promote it? I mean, were people
It
just
sold out on word of mouth. It was
Love that.
it was arranged through her manager, and he I only got to sell half the seats. He did the other half were for his own. the front half of the building was filled with all of the industry people and the folks he wanted to have in there. And all of my customers were mad at me because it's like, wait a minute, we don't even start until the 8th row. But by the end of it, nobody cared. They were in the room for history.
That is just fantastic. How many people do y'all fit in there?
100.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a very small
Very,
place.
very intimate. And the acoustics, I imagine they're good.
They're fantastic, and everybody thinks that somehow we designed it to be that way. No, it was an old concrete building.
Brick, all concrete.
And we thought, well, how are we ever going to not have this echo? And so I brought a bunch of couches and put them in the front. And the couches served, if you've ever been to a venue that has all of this egg crate stuff put up and to absorb the sound, well, we put a bunch of couches in there. There's 18 of them. And that served the purpose, and it gave us great sound. And then a few years after being over at the current location, we landed some friends with PreSonus sound equipment.
Yeah.
And
They're local, right?
They are
They're
local.
from Louisiana. And
Great story there.
Our entire system is a PreSonus system. So, I mean, I'm a walking advertisement for those folks. I know I sound like it, too, don't I?
No, that's great. We had them on the show a couple of years ago. So it sounds like neither of you guys have to advertise very much. I mean, you sort of have these followings and it's organic. I mean, how do you get the word out, Dustin, when you're performing
I'm still
somewhere?
trying to get out there. Like, you always meet new people. But emails, social media, just different collaborations with different musicians in different genres. I don't know.
Social media
it's a new world, man.
really changed the music world.
Social media is busy too. There's a lot of traffic. Like everybody's making music, so you have a lot of challenges. But I don't know. I'm cool with being small and organic. I call myself like a farm-to-table kind of operation. Like if a chef could say, "This is bull. I don't want to cook for this many people. I want to do it like this." Like we can do that too as musicians. I knew we could do it, and I'm doing it, but. It doesn't look like success, You know what I mean?
Well,
like the model of success as a
traditional
musician,
success,
like the ones
but-
that really succeed die, like in music, let's face it. Like you get put up there, you're this kind of spectacle, and it's not sustainable really, So I just didn't really want that kind of life.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Yeah.
And y'all really don't have to buy paid advertisements. I mean,
No, we do
your
some
followers-
Facebook ads, but other than that, I mean, we've never really had an ad budget. We went for the first 16 years with a 0 ad budget.
Love it.
And now our ad budget is whatever Facebook things that we'll do the little Facebook shares that you put a few bucks into. And the only reason we did that was because we got a grant to cover advertising that way. So it's nothing. We've never spent any money on anything other than the sound and making sure the musicians come out well. That's our whole purpose, is to make sure that the musicians walk out happy. We call it. Kinky Friedman came one time and he started to refer to it as it's been a financial pleasure. So that's how we describe it now. Our purpose is to make it a financial pleasure for the artists that play with us.
Do you all charge a cover?
We charge a cover, but it all goes to the artists. We're a pass-through company. Every cent of it ends up in the artist's hands, and we sustain our place by doing a big fundraiser. We do it in the month of March. It's called a Palooza. We started it, I guess this is our 11th year doing it. Our first one was done because we needed to put up a fence around our parking lot. We were in a rough neighborhood and people were walking onto our property, so we said we need a fence and we don't have $4,000, so we...
There you go.
We went and did a fundraiser to build a fence, and the next year we did a fundraiser to fix our roof.
Do
and
you
the
have
next year,
many artists knocking down your doors wanting to come perform? Or?
we really do, especially after that Newsweek article. It was funny, that article came out, and within 48 hours of the Newsweek article that came out, I guess it was in November, it said
November of 2019.
That's
and
it.
it listed Baton Rouge as one of the music meccas of the world.
we were the
And
only
y'all
one
were
that they
the
had
only-
in the United States, and
That
they
is
listed us at number
phenomenal,
one.
Chris.
And it was such a pleasure for it to have happened. But in the next 48 hours, we had 300 booking requests. 200 of them were from overseas. So Newsweek is apparently bigger overseas than it is
Great.
here. I couldn't even find a hard copy of the magazine until about 2 weeks ago.
No kidding, huh?
Yeah, I mean, it's not that I was trying to chase one down as much, but I just didn't know where Newsweek was sold anymore. It was.
And I'm wondering how the Newsweek reporter found y'all. I mean, were you just lucky that he stumbled upon you one day?
They told us that they had come in, experienced a show, and then it was a month before they even contacted us. And they said, we'd like to have you in this little article. Well, we thought we were going to get a one-line mention, but they wanted a photograph. So we had our photographer send 3 photographs up to them, and one of them had me in the photograph. And be darned if they didn't pick that one.
That's fantastic.
So I got my picture in a national magazine. So
you're listening to Out to Lunch. I'm Stephanie Riegel. I'm talking with Chris Maxwell of the Red Dragon Listening Room and musician Dustin Luke. We'll be right back after this very short break. You're listening to Out to Lunch. I'm Stephanie Riegel. I'm talking to Chris Maxwell of the Red Dragon Listening Room and musician Dustin Luke. Dustin, were you always destined to be a musician, or
No,
did you play as a kid?
No, I grew up an athlete.
Really?
Played football, actually. I played all sports, but I played football at McNeese for a year. I was a quarterback, but I ended up being too small. But I had the drive from being a small player. I always had to work harder than anybody. So, and then I discovered music in college and went to acting school in New York at Stella Adler Conservatory, and that kind of taught me I was an artist. There were old school teachers that were there when Brando was there, and it was a lot of pressure, and every day you're on stage, and that kind of brought me out because I'm a really quiet guy. I'd like to sit alone and mind my own business, but it brought me out, and so I wasn't always a musician, but the sports kind of gave me the confidence in the work
what
ethic
about
too.
the talent? I mean,
talent,
did they
yeah.
teach you how to play guitar, somebody, or you just
No,
picked it
that's
up?
all just stuff that came that I worked on privately.
So you taught yourself?
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah, I mean, I just learned. I'm in New York, man. You're with the best, so
Right.
you gotta figure it out. And I'm not I won't dazzle you on the guitar. I'm the guy bringing guys like Nels Klein, who plays with me sometimes. He's a Rolling Stones top 100 guitarist of all time. So, but those guys need something to play.
Yeah.
They need songs to play.
And so you'll write
I'm
the
the guy
music.
that writes it. I sing it, but maybe I'll play an instrument. But I'll bring other people from different genres to
And
make
you
new
literally,
stuff.
I mean, you taught yourself how to write music using a
It's
treble
not-
clef and
no,
a staff and
I
everything?
mean, I
no?
studied a little classical music. I don't write music on the staff or anything
Mm-hmm.
anymore. I don't have to. It's just like folk guys do. You just write on a guitar or piano or a drum machine, or whatever it takes. Nowadays we have amazing tools.
Sure.
With the computer, so yeah.
Interesting. Chris, how did you become such an audiophile? Were you always interested in music?
I was just a lover of music. I always was, and this goes back, to my teen years. And I realized early on that I was terrible at playing it. I tried many times, I failed many times, but the love of music was always there. And I found I had one skill in the music business, and that was I was a good judge of songs. Mm-hmm. And that led to having a record label that we ran for 14 years and did 52 albums in that time. And that was a ton of fun. And it segued into what we do now, because we had an open room and we had friends that were always coming through town. And when the M's Fine and Mellow Cafe here in town closed down, we had no place for songwriters to go.
Right.
It was a completely barren area for songwriting. And it was that way for the first 12 years that we were doing the listening room. There wasn't another anything, but listening rooms have caught on big time across the country now. I don't know that we were the first. I know we were the first that used the words listening room in the name.
Mm-hmm.
I know that because there's a guy who's out there suing everybody right now, trying to get them
In
to
Baton
stop
Rouge
using
or
that name.
nationwide?
It's a guy who's in Nashville who thinks that he somehow owns it. Listening room is a descriptive term, and it's
Correct.
been used since 1969. The first place I knew it was used was a place in Galveston called
Interesting.
the Old Quarter Acoustic Cafe and Listening Room, and it was it's a very famous Guy Clark played there, and Townes Van Zandt, and all of these really great artists. So anyway, we just thought it's the perfect descriptive term to tell people what it is.
Yeah, and now there are several places now in Baton Rouge, or a
We've
couple.
got a bunch. At one point, we've ended up. There was a list put together that had 32 songwriter-friendly venues within 20 miles of here.
Really?
And that all happened in about a 2-year period. Now, most of those had faded away. There's still a couple that are on the scene, and there's some commercial venues that are on the scene as well that are friendly to songwriters again.
And so, what would that mean for something to be friendly to songwriters? I mean,
we're kind of the opposite. Places in Baton Rouge always wanted cover bands, play the
right?
play that funky
Play the
music,
party.
white boy.
Play the funky white boy.
And we used to put up signs that said, we will shoot you if you play Brown Eyed Girl. I mean, it was, and then at the bottom it would say, Van Morrison is the lone exception, the guy who wrote it. So we really wanted to concentrate on original music, and so we told everybody that we booked, we only want you to play your own songs. And we still take the license through ASCAP and BMI and all, because somebody inevitably is going to play somebody else's song along the way. But that's not what we want to concentrate on. We want to concentrate on, and if somebody does want to do a cover song, it's so much cooler if they say, "Hey, my buddy wrote this one. Let me play it for you." You get more of a sense of the art that is happening, as opposed to, nothing against cover versions. That's a skill in and of itself, but that's kind of not what we've embraced.
And we've had this discussion on this show and, in other places before about why there isn't more in Baton Rouge. And so I'm glad to hear you say that there are 30-something listening rooms in this general area, or there were a couple of years ago. But even if you went back 5 or 6 years, I know we were having a conversation on this show with Johnny Palazzotto one day about, back in the late 60s, early 70s, there was so much homegrown talent, and then something happened, and everything went just kind of mainstream. Because I know there are people in Baton Rouge hungry for what you all do. Why isn't there more? What is it with the culture here?
One of the coolest things that's out there right now and it's proliferating like crazy since the whole music business kind of imploded with the record business going down a lot, are house concerts. I'm guessing do you do some house concerts?
I do a lot of that.
Okay, tell us about this. Wait.
In the world.
We when people would email me and I did my first tour, it started off in like house concerts, so very small. Most of these houses, I'm driving up to the driveway. These people are so pumped that I'm coming because they've been listening to my record. They don't know who I am, and it's the first meeting, and I might play for 50 people. Then maybe somebody's in that crowd that year and it's like, man, I live in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I have a barn. Next year we're gonna do a hog roast. So that's how my experience is. It's gonna become, and then
cool.
It's my event. Like there's nobody telling me what to do, no producers. It's my own equipment. So it's.
And they're all acoustic?
No, it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, they can spread out a bit. It depends who. We have one in town here. It's called the Grace House Concerts, and if we have a night off from what we're doing, we go to their functions.
Really?
I mean,
where are they? I don't even.
It's in a fellow named Colin Grace. He and his wife hosted in their home, and we go sit in their living room. We sometimes we'll go early and have dinner with the artist before the house concert. It's music the way music used to be when everything was personal. We got to the point in the 70s where it was massive bands. It was huge. It was Bruce Springsteen and waiting in line 48 hours to get tickets and all of this. And you lost that personal touch. Well, the personal touch is back. And it's a little underground, but it's more fun that way.
Absolutely. That's very, very exciting. Do you see this going on in New Orleans too, or is New Orleans more commercial because it's so touristy?
I do my own events in New Orleans too, and I used to live in the middle of it. I lived in St. Roch. I'd moved there after Brooklyn. I bought a house, and I wanted to be, that's where a lot of artists were moving.
Sure.
A lot of West Coast people, a lot of New York people were moving to New Orleans. I'm like, well, great. I'm going to move back home. And it was okay. For me, as a songwriter in New Orleans, it's kind of like you got to really entertain. And it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like you got to be big and kind of like celebratory and party. So the songwriting room there, it's tough. I have a lot of great songwriters. I don't know if you know Julie Odell. She's amazing, but it's tough for people like us. You have to find your own way, which I have, like the Marigny Opera House, Hotel Peter and Paul is amazing.
The Opera House is the coolest place in the
I play
world.
there, so
Really? I don't know about that.
You have to find ways to work.
Yeah.
You have to find your own path. You have to be resilient. You have to think out of the box. Like, we're not living in the 70s. We're not living in the 80s. Like, the business is not the same, so don't go down the same path. You have to be brave and know what success is for you. You have to define your own success.
How do musicians, quote, make it today? And I'm not saying make it to a Joan Baez level or a Bruce Springsteen level, but just to a sustainable level, right? I mean, without record labels that really propel you to fame, I mean, and so many platforms on social media that you might just easily get lost in the fray. How do you break through?
It is so hard for musicians to make anything these days. That's actually how we got into this, into doing all these shows, where musicians that we knew were starving. And it's like, well, and there was no place for them to play around where we were, so we said we'll start setting up shows. And if everybody, if these little listening rooms kind of would set up in every city across the country, there would be, and it's kind of happening. I mean, it's not happening in any great numbers yet, but it's happening enough that there's like a little circuit going on. I was on the phone coming up here talking with a little bar that is also kind of a listening room down in New Orleans, and we're kind of getting together on trying to get a couple of these big artists. You take the Friday, I'll take the Saturday, and it in effect keeps people on the road a little more. There's 20% less live music venues now than there was 20 years ago.
Nationwide?
In the year 2000.
Well, I think things change, Like, people don't want to go sit and watch 4 bands, and it's different. It's very different, and I recognized that early on. Like, people like events. They like well-curated experiences. Like, put them in a different room that's not a venue, or...
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You have to think out of the box. You have to cut out all the middlemen. There's a lot of people. When I was on a label, it was Atlantic. Huge building they're trying to pay for. You know what I mean? And you're one of the guys out there, like, trying to make that money. And, your records are not in the stores in every town you go to, and they're telling you you're not selling records. It's a lot of stuff that you have to deal with as a musician.
I hate what Jazz Fest has become. Like,
Yeah,
oh my
I
God, it's
can't
right.
deal with it.
They just try to wow you every year with more and more
Yeah.
bigger and bigger names, and it just gets more and more crowded, and the ticket prices
On the
keep going
infield
up.
of a horse track that you
Right.
can't spend. It's like, where do you go?
I know.
Can't use the bathroom. Can't get food.
So what advice would y'all give to young musicians? I mean, what would you tell them? What do you tell them?
I would tell them to do exactly what we've been talking about, which is find your own way. The Fleetwood Macs of the past are gone. You're never going to have
It's not gonna happen.
the people that go out and get $3 million to make an album like Tusk. They're not going to get. They're not going to have this kind of support. What they're going to have is an opportunity to prove themselves.
You say $3 million on a record. That's a good point, because, like, the waste in the music industry, like,
Probably
it's
not.
ridiculous.
An entire marching
$3
band
million
on that record was-
back in the day to make a record.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
We had a record label. We did 52 albums, and our average album, and it was the same thing we're doing now. It was a nonprofit thing. It was a not-for-profit because we were too small to even be a nonprofit. Our average budget was $2,000 to make a record. We never spent. The most we ever spent on a record was $7,000 ever. So you can do things on the cheap, and if they retain the spirit of it, if they have the passion in it. Yeah, we didn't have every note perfect, and we didn't have the greatest of equipment, but boy, I tell you what, some of those records still hold up to this day.
And y'all would produce them actually and distribute them?
We did. We had distribution, but nowadays that's less important than it used to be. I mean, we're still officially in distribution. We don't sell much anymore. We haven't made a record in 10 years, but it was wonderful. It was a great time.
That it was. Well, Chris Maxwell and Dustin Luke, you both are bringing so much to the local market here in Baton Rouge. We're lucky to have you elevating the cultural offerings and opportunities and giving people good stuff to listen to. So thanks so much for making the community a better place and for helping local musicians and for sharing your stories with me on Out to Lunch.
Well, thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
My guests today on Out to Lunch have been Chris Maxwell of the Red Dragon Listening Room and musician Dustin Luke. You can find out more about the Red Dragon Listening Room and Dustin Luke by going to the links on our website, itsbatonrouge.la. If you want to know what we all look like, you can find photos from this show on itsbatonrouge.la and on our Out to Lunch Baton Rouge social media. Out to Lunch is a production of INO Broadcasting for itsbatonrouge.la and WRKF 89.3 FM. The producer of our show is Grant Morris. Our technical producer is Eric Merle. Our associate producer is Peter Raschuti. And our Baton Rouge business consultants are Charlie D'Agostino, Dave Winwood, and Ann Edelman. Today's show was engineered by Colin Peden. I'm Stephanie Riegel. Thanks for joining me. I look forward to meeting you again next week around the table here at Mansur's for more business Baton Rouge style on Out to Lunch.
Out to Lunch Baton Rouge is recorded live over lunch at Mansur's on the Boulevard in Baton Rouge. Mansur's is open for lunch daily 11 to 2, for dinner nightly, and for brunch on Saturdays and Sundays. Mitchell Foreman wrote and performs all the music on Out to Lunch. You can hear Mitchell's music anywhere great jazz is sold or streamed, and at mitchellforeman.com. Major support for Out to Lunch is provided by the law firm of Jones Walker, established in 1937 with over 375 attorneys in offices throughout the U.S., providing a comprehensive range of services to a local, national, and international client base. JonesWalker.com. And by Short & Associates, legal recruiters in Louisiana and Texas. And Orange Theory Fitness, delivering fitness results for a healthier world.